and that right there is what rock and roll has always been about. That sharp edge, that dangerous peak, that moment where things almost fall apart, but don't. This song is about rock and roll itself. Neil Young never set out to play beautifully. He set out to play honestly. While other musicians spent their lives polishing every note until it shined, Young left the rust right where it was. He wanted the cracks, the flaws, the places where the light sneaks in. I want to see you dance again. His guitar solos drifted like unfinished prayers, never quite landing where you expected. His voice broke in exactly the right moments. Perfection never interested him. Feeling did. He chased sounds that unsettled him, records that frightened him a little, music that moved him because it refused to pretend. He didn't want lies wrapped in melody. He wanted truth, even when it hurt. I think I'm in very good shape to, deliver a top-quality performance. Neil Young's favorite albums were never the safe ones. They were the records that bled, the ones that carried scars, the ones that didn't apologize for being damaged. He collected those albums like proof, evidence that beauty and pain could exist inside the same body. They taught him that mistakes weren't weaknesses. They were sacred. That searching mattered more than arriving. That one honest note would always matter more than 1,000 perfect ones. Behind every wall of feedback and every whispered lyric were these 7 albums. They taught him how to be fearless, how to break rules that deserved breaking, how to trust your gut when the whole world tells you you're wrong. These weren't just records, they were reasons to keep going. Here are the 7 albums Neil Young called his favorites, the records that taught him to trust the noise. If this speaks to your soul, subscribe to Legends Uncovered and tell us which album you believe changed his path forever. 1. Buffalo Springfield. Neil Young chose his own band's first album, not out of ego, but truth. Released in 1966, Buffalo Springfield captured something fragile and rare, the moment before everything changes. For What It's Worth became an anthem, but the deeper tracks mattered more. Burned. Flying on the Ground is Wrong. Leave. The album was messy, uneven, alive. What made it sacred was possibility. That hunger, that innocence. Buffalo Springfield taught Neil Young his greatest lesson. The searching matters more than the finding. 2. Electric Ladyland. Jimi Hendrix freed Neil Young's guitar. Released in 1968, Electric Ladyland shattered every rule. Hendrix didn't just play, he summoned lightning. Voodoo Child, Slight Return, sounded like the earth tearing open. All Along the Watchtower turned Dylan's words into fire. 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, drifted through unknown soundscapes. Feedback wasn't a mistake. Distortion wasn't noise. It was freedom. Neil Young learned that perfection was overrated. Feeling was everything. Every Crazy Horse jam, every wild solo, Hendrix was there. Electric Ladyland taught Young that sometimes the amplifier speaks better than words. 3. I Ain't Marching Anymore. Phil Ochs broke Neil Young's heart. Released in 1965, I Ain't Marching Anymore was protest music that actually protested. Angry, clear, unafraid. Amazing writers. Over time, Ochs sang about war, racism, and hypocrisy with conviction. No hints, no soft edges. Neil Young recognized that fire. When Young later wrote Ohio, Phil Ochs was there. When he sang Let's Impeach the President decades later, Ochs was still teaching. Phil Ochs showed Neil Young that artists had responsibilities beyond entertainment. When the world burns, you don't hum. You point at the fire. 4. Aftermath. Neil Young heard Aftermath and felt danger. Released in 1966, this was the Rolling Stones at their hungriest, before fame weighed them down and before the damage set in. It was a beautiful song. For some reason, it really, really got to me. All right. And I could feel the magic of the music. Paint It Black sounded like the world collapsing. Under My Thumb swaggered with uncomfortable power. Going home stretched for 11 minutes when radio wanted 3. The Stones didn't care, and Young noticed. Keith Richards' guitar snarled. Mick Jagger sang like a man who'd seen too much. Brian Jones added colors no one expected. Sitar, marimba, dulcimer. Danger and experimentation lived together. Young carried that attitude forward. When he recorded Tonight's the Night, raw and grieving, the Stones were there. When Crazy Horse pushed feedback into infinity, the Stones understood. Aftermath taught Young that rock and roll works best when it scares people. The Rolling Stones gave Neil Young permission to be dangerous. 5. Rubber Soul. Neil Young watched the Beatles grow up on Rubber Soul. Released in 1965, the album caught them between teenage hysteria and artistic hunger. They weren't boys anymore. They were searching. I felt close to them over the years, and I have a lot of respect for Paul McCartney as a man. Norwegian wood twisted folk into something mysterious and Eastern. In My Life looked backward with clarity. Nowhere Man questioned everything pop music sold. Young heard them evolving in real time. The Beatles sounded unsure in the best possible way. Not lost, but searching. Acoustic guitars met sitars. Love songs admitted doubt. They had the world at their feet and chose risk instead of comfort. What Neil Young admired most was their refusal to stay safe. They could have made She Loves You forever and lived comfortably. Instead, they chased something truer. Rubber Soul proved that success and growth didn't have to be enemies. When Young released Harvest and then followed it with Time Fades Away, he was living that lesson. Never repeat yourself. Never play it safe. The Beatles showed him that evolution wasn't betrayal. It was survival.
6. The freewheelin' Bob Dylan you just started peeling off. You took off your wig and said, "How do I look?" Neil Young heard Bob Dylan and realized words could be weapons. The freewheelin' Bob Dylan arrived in 1963 and sounded like nothing else on earth. Dylan sang like he didn't care whether you liked it or not. His voice was sharp, nasal, unmistakably his. He asked questions without waiting for answers. Young was still a teenager playing in Canadian bands. But this album showed him that music could matter far beyond the dance floor, really emotional, not very technical. So I like that it gives me a chance to express myself. Blowin' in the Wind asked questions the world tried to avoid. A Hard Rain's a Gonna Fall painted apocalyptic images in poetry. Don't Think Twice, It's All Right walked away from love without looking back. Dylan didn't sing beautifully. He sang because he had to. Neil Young recognized a teacher. What struck him most was Dylan's courage. Standing alone with an acoustic guitar and challenging everything. The folk scene wanted simplicity, Dylan gave complexity. The world wanted answers, Dylan offered more questions. He didn't care about pleasing anyone. He cared about the truth. That fearlessness changed Young forever. You hear it later in Ohio and Southern Man, songs that didn't ask permission. Songs that said uncomfortable things because they needed saying. Bob Dylan taught Neil Young that music could be a hammer and sometimes the world needed hitting.
7. 40. Greatest Hits. Neil Young heard Hank Williams and understood loneliness for the first time. Hank's voice carried weight that had nothing to do with volume. He sang about heartbreak like he'd invented it, about drinking, leaving, and trains that never arrived anywhere. Growing up in Canada with folk music in his veins, Young heard something ancient in Hank's songs, something older than rock and roll, something true, before truth even had a sound. And it's a very special guitar. Yeah, it used to belong to Hank Williams. That just blows me away. Yeah, me too. I'm so lonesome I could cry, didn't need explanation. You felt it in your bones. Your cheatin' heart said what everyone knew but didn't want to admit. Hank Williams sang plainly, simply, with a crack in his voice that made you believe every word. Neil Young learned something vital from that. Pain didn't need decoration. Say it straight. Let it hurt. What shattered Young was Hank's honesty. No metaphors to hide behind, no studio tricks. Just a man, a guitar, and feelings too big to carry alone. Hank died young, burned out at 29, but his songs survived because they told the truth. Neil Young carried that lesson his entire career. Don't smooth it out, don't clean it up. Let people hear the break in your voice. When Young later wrote Helpless, or sang Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Hank Williams was right there behind him, reminding him that country music and rock and roll were born from the same place, the human heart when it can't lie anymore. Stay hungry, stay uncertain, stay true. Neil Young never stopped searching. These 7 albums taught him to trust the noise, embrace the mistakes, and never polish away the truth. What album lives in your bones? Tell us below, and subscribe to Legends Uncovered for more stories told in feedback and feeling.